Hi there, Glocal citizens. Welcome back to the podcast that inspires a borderless mindset around manifesting a new world. I am your host, Florence Adu, coming to you with part 2 of my conversation with Kobina Ankomah Graham. Kobby Graham, for short. He was raised between the alternate realities of Ghana and Britain. He is passionately curious about music, African culture, and counterculture. Through almost 2 decades of lecturing, researching, public speaking, developing creative projects, curating music, and freelance writing, he has championed arts and culture. He has explored this idea in settings ranging from classrooms to international conferences and in numerous workshops, panels, podcasts like this one, publications, and dance floors. Along the way, he has been profiled on platforms like the BBC, written for others like The Guardian, received a Miles Moreland African Writers Scholarship and Danita funding for his PhD research on Ghana's alternative music scene. He's going to talk a little bit more about that in our conversation today. In doing these things, he is creating pathways for young African creatives, cultural practitioners, and journalists to follow. So in case you missed it last week, go back first and listen, because you get a wealth of knowledge about Kobby's path and journey going from the UK back to Ghana. And we're picking up the conversation talking about the musical renaissance that is happening across the globe, particularly around Black music. So would you say that there's a little bit of a renaissance pulled by this kind of alternative thought? Because, you know, we had soul music and then we have pop music. And even R&B has gone through a lull, I would say. You know, there's just not a lot of love songs out there. It's been a lot more like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's just very real.
Right.
Yeah, they say that like R&B is not about like 4 men singing in the rain to 1 woman anymore. Now it's kind of like, I only love my mama and my bed. Like, you know, that kind of, you know, like, it's not romantic anymore.
Right,
That's what people
exactly.
are saying.
That's it. Romantic, exactly. And so are we seeing this emotion coming through, like real emotion coming through again?
I definitely think so. And I think that exists in the so-called mainstream as well as the alternative space, in the sense that I think one person who a lot of people started to associate that with was Kanye. When Kanye came out, it was him versus 50 Cent. 50 Cent was a lot more of the kind of like, you know, like, you know, bravado streets. And I remember very famously, he competed with Kanye, and he said in his first week he will make more sales than Kanye, something along those lines. And Kanye like wiped the floor with him. And it was an interesting sea change. You had like, I mean, Kanye, for all his antics and stuff, there was a certain kind of personal touch, a certain connecting with emotions in his music that a lot of people picked up on, both over there and over here. And so then fast forward, and I mean, I'm not saying that he was the first, but he was definitely the highest profile. And that's the thing, we pick up on these things. And so while we have musicians who have been doing that for a while, it's become more of the main thing to do. So like, if you take an artist like Kiddy right now, Kiddy's latest song, I can't remember what it's called, but he's basically saying, I'm not okay.
Right, I've heard.
That came out like 2 weeks ago.
Isn't that the name of the song?
It might be like, I'm not okay or something.
I just heard it. Exactly.
Walasi, who I think is one of the best artists, not just in Ghana, but in Africa or in the world. He's just incredibly talented. He can rap, he can sing. He's a visual artist as well, amongst other things. Walasi's latest EP is called The Rap Why Therapy.
Yes, that sounds very Walasi.
And it's very kind of like,
it's called I Lied.
And I think that the Kiddy's song, the lyrics go, if I told you that I'm okay, I lied. That's the lyric. And he talks about like his emotions. Like, that's not the staple of like our music. I mean, we do talk about emotions. Like, one of my favorite themes that you can trace through the history of Ghanaian music is not just Ghanaian music, African music. Men who are mourning the fact that their woman has left them
Yes.
for a richer man.
Yeah.
So if you think of Premier Gao,
Yeah.
that's what they're singing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that song is literally
Yeah.
a guy who is singing his pain.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
Chin Chin Biedi
Yeah.
Mewu. That
Yeah.
song, that's the theme of that song.
Sure,
Azingele by Rough and Smooth. There are so many.
Yeah.
I feel like you could do a compilation album dedicated to jilted men.
Yeah.
And then you have the flip, the late Ebony Rains, who she's just like, yes, I am the one who's doing the jilting. Yeah, like
Right.
if you break my heart, I'll date your father. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there've been feelings.
Yes.
But generally speaking, the music is about having a good time and escaping.
Sure.
Right?
Yes.
But not so much anymore.
Yeah. Well, and it's a sign of the times.
It's a sign of the times.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like a lot more emphasis and understanding on mental health.
Yep. Yep.
And that I feel has been a bit more prominent in the alternative space for longer and is now entering the mainstream.
Right. So speaking of different genres and thought, let's talk about mindset.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you what your mindset hack is. So I ask you to share your favorite or an innovative mindset hack. Now, this is one that you practice, one that you know of, or one that you can imagine.
Okay. So what I would say is one of the things that I've always believed in and that I'm comforted to see more of is collaboration over competition. So when we were doing Dust, for example, once in a while, some new magazine will pop up and people would say, oh, you guys have competition now. And I'll be like, why would they be competition?
Right.
We would actually call them up and be like, can we help you guys? Are there any ways we could help you?
Yeah.
Which was just, that's not how Ghanaian business tends to operate.
Right, yeah.
But I think that it has a past and it has a future in the sense that we, like I was saying, the African spirit is a communal spirit. There are so many things that we do that have community in mind. And that's the way culturally we have been. For all the colonial influence and everything, there are certain things that we just, like, you just can't take away. And so, in as much as we can be as capitalistic and individualistic and stuff, I think that the spirit of collaboration and community will always take you further. And it's very necessary in places like Ghana where not everybody has. You have the have-nots as well.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like this teaching of, you can go to school, for example, to learn how to be an engineer. Great. Why do you want to be an engineer? Is it just for your personal enrichment? Or are you serving a greater purpose? And is that purpose perhaps the common good? And so I'm a very big believer in the common good. And I think that we achieve the common good with a mindset of collaboration. And I would take it a step further and I would say that one of the interesting things happening in the West is the West has moved from a time when it was a lot more communal into this very individualistic period that it's in. And something that it is struggling with is the advent of social media. Because what social media is, it's really taken over and it's forcing them to think in slightly more communal ways. And you're starting to see, it's like the rules of engagement on social media tend to be very toxic. So you think of Twitter, for example, or you think of Facebook, and it's
the fights.
The fights and stuff like that. And people
Bullying.
are being forced to learn over time that, yes, you can cancel someone, but you also run the risk of getting cancelled yourself. So how authentic can you be in this space? You know, people are being forced over time, very slowly, to understand that there's a value to empathy and thinking beyond yourself. And that's the way the people who started the internet, like the Sir Tims and those guys, that's how they envisioned it at first before corporations got involved.
Right. Yeah.
It was supposed to bring us together.
Right.
Think about things like crowdsourcing.
Right. Yeah.
People who go online and they pull together, essentially, to build things.
Yeah.
This is a wildly African thing. And so to me, I see that Africa actually has a lot to teach the rest of the world about what it means to be communal. And if we went back and we studied a lot more of that communalism in our history, it would have application today in spaces like the internet, in spaces like social media. But we have that disconnect. So I try personally, as much as I can, to think about things from the perspective of the common good. And I really think that when you think of a place like Ghana, there are two Ghanas. I think that there are people in Ghana who are thinking about, let's say, themselves and their families. And then there are the people who are thinking of the common good beyond that, beyond their own circles. That's why I love the counterculture scene, because there's a care that is shown for people who you do not personally know. That's what activism is about. And there was a point in our history where we all pulled together. And that's what brought us independence. So we've kind of we've drifted from that, but I feel like we have a chance to turn the boat around and be more communal. And I'm seeing it in the music. I feel like culture is often a predictor of where we can go.
And it is how we go, typically, right? It's the creative arts and everything that typically moves culture and moves people. And I like how, from what you said about the collaborative mindset, because I've just kind of been really thinking about this in terms of democracy, and democracy is done. It has failed Africans. However, the foundations of what it means to be in a democratic society, we already knew that. We just had so that's basically what you're saying. We already had this communal mindset. We already knew. And so because democracy basically became a tool for capitalism, that's where we've broken down. So if we can
institutionalizing of democratic ideals, that institution hasn't worked. But the democratic ideal, like you're saying, that spirit was there.
It's inherent. I mean, it's actually quite inherent in people as humans have evolved, right? So once we figured out that we have to work together to tend the land, because that's why we're here, right? We're here to tend it. But beyond saying this is mine and that's yours, which then that's where the capitalism comes in, then we survived and we thrived. And so, collaboration.
And so in terms of it as a personal hack, in my dealings with people, I try as much as I can to move with the spirit, not of competition, but of collaboration. How can I help you? And if I see you as being a common organism with me, then by helping you, I'm helping myself.
Exactly. Okay, let's put that in the mindset toolbox. It makes so much sense. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit more about the business of being a doctoral student, because it's not easy. Number one, it's not easy to get to that. And so even just being a lecturer, in terms of planning your living and how your lifestyle has worked around being in academia and being in this cultural space, and then being a doctoral student. How have you crafted that?
It's very hard, I must say. I think there's a general rule, particularly when you exist in the countercultural space, that, so let's say from the perspective of a musician who chooses not to chase trends, it's easier to quote unquote get to the top. But with the counterculture artist, what they'll find is that it's not as easy to get to the top, but if you do the same thing constantly for a very long time, you will eventually achieve success. So you have to be in it for the long game. And I feel like for people who are existing in the creative space, like myself, cultural practitioners. So I think first and foremost, I'm a cultural practitioner over and being an academic even. And so like my academia is an extension of my cultural practice. My DJing is an extension of my cultural practice. My writing is an extension of my cultural practice, etc. So I would say that there are no set paths. There are no set paths.
It's like the wave of culture.
There are no set paths. And so one of the things that I did not notice this, but I've been incredibly honored by, is when I go onto, let's say, Instagram, and I see, let's say, whether it's Instagram or like a website or anywhere, and I'll see someone like Ekobans, young Ghanaian fashionista and writer, an excellent writer, and I'll reach out to him and with the communal spirit in mind basically just say, you're doing really dope stuff. You're like the publications that you're writing for internationally are magazines that I would have dreamt of writing for. And he's like, oh my God, you do not understand how much Dust inspired me. Or as we're sitting here, another person who interviewed me once was Elizabeth Johnson. I call her culture, the culture princess, basically, culture hima. Like she is all over the cultural scene, hosting and talking and organizing workshops and just, and she's working with the Writers Project for Ghana, like doing all this work. And she tells me that she looks to people like me who have forged the path. And so it makes me think that while I didn't have anybody who I could look to and basically be like, that's the career that I wanted. It took me years to even realize that the word cultural practitioner is a thing. They have existed here. Afua Sutherland was a cultural practitioner. If you think about culture within the Nkrumah administration, it was Afua Sutherland. So there have been people like that, Dr. A.C. Sutherland, Adi after her, etc. They have existed, but most young people, if you were to ask them, if you're interested in culture and you ask them what they want to do, it's not a phrase that they know. Cultural practitioner.
Right.
And so my thing is that a lot of us, both the practitioners and the artists, are essentially forging paths. And so in trying to live our day to day and making the decisions that we make and who we speak to and the choices that we make, we are essentially creating pathways that other people who are younger than us can go to a parent and be like, I want to be like this person. We didn't have that. You see?
So it's basically innovation.
It's innovation. So business-wise, it's hard. Like, it's hard. For me as a DJ, it's been hard being like, I was one of the first DJs in Ghana who dedicated himself to alternative music.
Right.
And what that means is that there wasn't a market per se. We've had to grow that market. We were the people who helped to start Chaliwote and all these things. And now it exists. And so one of my points of pride is I was having a chat with a former student of mine and someone who I helped in a small way to learn how to DJ. He's called F the DJ.
F the DJ.
F the DJ.
Okay.
And we were having a chat and he's quit his day job and is now a full-time DJ.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he DJs radio, he does clubs and stuff.
Sure.
The fact that you can do that now.
Right.
I could not do that in my time.
There wasn't that demand. There just wasn't the space for it.
When I see an organization like Imola hold a rave and pack a place out, and then like they're playing this combination of just club music and Ghanaian music and this and all of that, and you just couldn't really do that.
It's pretty. Like you could get reggae here,
reggae,
and
no
then,
problem.
and then maybe
rap,
some
maybe,
like
R&B, gospel for sure.
But
not like all this other stuff. And so it's hard being the first or amongst the first. And economically speaking, it's not super rewarding. And so you have to understand, I did a law degree. Many of my peers, I have peers who work in Hong Kong, who work in Dubai, who work in the UK, who are top level lawyers and stuff. Some of them work for private companies and, just and they will say, yeah, let's do a 10-year reunion, let's all go to whatever.
Like,
and
nah.
I can't even begin to dream of that. And so one of the hacks that I've had to have from, let's say, a money and business perspective is I've had to really humble myself and just be like, I have to be okay with not being fantastically wealthy.
Sure, yeah.
Maybe that's not my line. Am I okay with that? If I'm not okay with that, then maybe I need to switch professions.
Sure.
But if you believe in what you're doing and you also form community, community tends to look after each other.
Right, yeah.
And so, last October on my birthday, I wrote a list on Instagram of things that I would like for my birthday. I said I wanted a cinema ticket, a massage, a trip, like somewhere. I want plants. Within a week or two,
you had it all.
I'd crossed everything off on that list. And sometimes it was from people who, these were not close friends.
Sure.
Random strangers, and just people were just like, we see the work that you're doing.
Wow.
We see the person that you are, and that's mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
And so it requires, when you're operating in spaces like these, a different mindset and a different metric for success.
Sure, yeah.
And if you don't have that, you will either leave or you'll just be actually unhappy. And you will go through tough times, and it's community that will get you through.
Back to that collaboration. Like people need people.
Yes,
that's
people
for
need
sure.
people. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get out of the business.
Okay.
Let's get into who is Kobby besides being a DJ. I mean, because a lot of what you said is like the hobbies turn into the professional side. But I like to ask a specific question, which is: are you a reader? You are. Are you a writer? Or are you a listener? Which I know you're all of these things. But tell us some of your favorite reads, watches, and listens.
Okay, so right now, I'm not so much of a reader, except for academically speaking.
Right, of course, yeah.
So honestly, one of my favorite reads right now is lying around here. It's A Quick Thing About Afrobeats by Christian Adolfo. It's, here it is.
Yes.
A Quick Thing on Afrobeats by Christian Adolfo. And I say this because Christian is a young Ghanaian British writer. And what he's done here is he's written what is the first text on Afrobeats. Because Afrobeats is very cutting edge. No one has done this work yet. When you go into academic spaces, for example, you can go into Google Scholar right now and type in WizKid. You will not find a lot of writing about someone who is as globally huge as WizKid is.
Right.
Yeah, much less before you now drill it down to alternative, like.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
So he's written this, and it's part music journalism, part memoir. And what I love about it is, often Ghana is left out of the Afrobeats story.
We really are.
It's very annoying to me as someone who has watched and who knows, for example, that had it not been for Azonto and that picking up of speed,
there would be no such thing.
You just wouldn't have Oliver Twist by D'banj and Don Jazzy. Like when you play next to Azonto, you can see you know. And often Ghana, we gestate the sound, and Nigeria comes, perfects it, and amplifies it.
It's true.
You see, and what he's done writing it as a Ghanaian is he's pulled all the threads together. Ghana is there, the UK diaspora is there, Nigeria is there, and so it's a great book. I'm really enjoying reading this, and it helps towards my PhD.
Of course.
So as far as reads go, that would be something that I'm reading. Listening wise, I'm always listening to music constantly. I think as a DJ, I try as much as I can not to play a lot of old music, actually.
Really?
Because there's new music coming out every week.
So I like that you said that, because I find that DJs are often quite lazy and they don't do the work. And the DJs that I fell in love with, because you know that song, Last Night a DJ Saved My Life. Most of these DJs are not saving lives.
They're not saving lives. So I can look at it from different perspectives. I think in a place like Ghana, I've seen DJs who I know they have amazing taste. They listen to great, diverse forms of music. But when you put them in front of a club, they will play to the crowd.
Sure.
And it was a running argument that I used to have when I was working at Joy FM, because Joy FM it's a very kind of just commercial station, and I don't think they were in the business of breaking hits.
No.
They would play what is already a hit.
Yep.
And I think that was more their format. It's not a youth station.
Right.
And so the older people, what makes them feel nostalgic enough to part ways with their money, with adverts in between, you see. So yeah. And so, but I've just always thought that if you expose Ghanaians to all the music that exists, to a much broader amount of music, they will go for it.
I agree. I think so too.
And I think that's being proved now.
It's true. And even though, I think a lot of times the DJs look at what the crowd is doing as an indicator. And I think sometimes they're just processing. I see Ghanaians just processing a lot, especially if it's new. And then they come back and they'll say, oh, that one there, So I agree.
So right now, one of the reasons we brought Soul Emotion back at the mix is because now when you go into town, for the most part, all you're hearing is Afrobeats and Amapiano.
Yes.
And I love Afrobeats and I love Amapiano.
Right.
But
not all night.
Not all night and not everywhere.
Exactly.
By the time I came to Ghana, it was R&B, hip hop, and dancehall. Hip life was in the mix as well. But there's so many more genres than this, and not all musicians make these sounds. And so I'm just like, rather than only playing all the other stuff, or rather than, like, people would come up to me and be like, but all this music is great. You're playing Afrobeat and you're playing this and that. When are you going to start playing like 50 Cent and stuff? We're in the middle of Usu. You can throw a stone any venue you go to. You can get all that music. Yeah. So this is a one space that we've dedicated to playing all the other stuff.
Sure.
Can we live?
Yeah.
Seriously, you're gonna come into this space and be like, yeah, but where's the 50 Cent?
Yeah, really. I like that because on your website you have one of your shows, which was a tribe called No Request.
Yes. So what we've done with Soul Emotion that we used to do between 2007 and 2011.
Yeah.
And then there was an event that I started with Yauda Banka. So Rodney Savage and Kwekwa Nancy are the ones with whom I was doing Soul Emotion.
Okay.
And then occasionally we'd be joined by Miss Na from Novo FM.
Okay.
And then just before the pandemic.
Yeah, I remember. T-Bar. Yeah.
Exactly. It was, so Bar and Bean, and we would do this thing called a tribe called No Request. And it's similar in concept.
Yeah.
So the new Soul Emotion is actually the merging of these two.
Okay.
Rodney and Yao from Tribe called No. We've come together and we're doing this, and the situation hasn't changed. It's just the music has changed. So there's the mainstream music that everybody plays, and we're just like, you know what? Let there be diversity. And so our event, you'll come and you can hear some stuff from the past. So there's 60s music in there, 70s music, 80s music, 90s music. But then there's a lot of brand new music.
Right.
And we also try and make it a point to showcase young Ghanaian musicians who are making great music, whether it's in the mainstream, out of the mainstream. And so listening every Sunday, the only algorithm that I don't mind that spies on me is Spotify. And Spotify and I have a great relationship. Yeah. And it does a great job of finding music that I like. And so every Sunday I'm listening to Spotify, I'm listening to radio shows and particular DJs who I am inspired by. And I pull all of this together, and so every week I have new music and I'm itching to play it. Sure.
So here's a question for a DJ. So for a DJ, which platform is the best research platform? So you just said Spotify, so that works for you. But there's SoundCloud, there's Mixcloud, over time, it seems like Spotify is rising to the top. But how about the others?
So I would actually say that if you want to discover music, Spotify is definitely great. If you're much younger, TikTok is doing an awesome job there as well, because TikTok is breaking.
So how is that? I mean, is it artists or they're actually playing music?
So sometimes it's artists, and then TikTok is content creation.
Yeah.
And so it's the songs
so
that they play in the background.
Got it.
And then you have the dance trends.
Right.
You see, and stuff like that.
Yes,
and so you have like an artist like Pink Pantheress. She blew up on TikTok, and she was very intentional about that. And so that's great. So for the younger guys, that really works. For someone like me, there are music writers that I trust.
Okay.
So, for example, the website Hamatan Rain, started by Benoit Boateng. Hamatan Rain, I think, is still for me one of the go-to places, maybe the best for a lot of the alternative music sounds that are coming out now. So I regularly check them out.
Okay.
iMullah are also doing a great job in a similar vein. So I go to these places. There's a music writer for Music in Africa called Gabriel Myers Hansen. Anytime Gabriel writes anything, I read it because he writes amazingly, and I like who he chooses to spotlight. So those are, let's say, local ones.
Sure.
Then internationally, who do I follow these days? It used to be places like Pigeons and Planes, but these days I just listen.
Yeah.
Like Selection Radio.
Selection, yeah.
Yes, and Selection are simultaneously on SoundCloud, and then they're on Apple Music.
Right.
So if you have Apple Music, great.
Right.
If you don't, check them out on SoundCloud.
Right.
They play a lot of stuff, and if you pay attention, so this is another thing. When I was on Ghanaian radio, because I'm not on radio so much anymore.
Sure.
But when I was at Joy in particular, I noticed that we'd play a lot of music, but we wouldn't always tell you who
it was, right?
Exactly.
Shazam.
So this was pre-Shazam.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, but so now people can Shazam, and it's great.
Yeah.
But because Shazam
they still
wasn't
don't.
there. No, they still don't.
Yeah.
And so what I used to do, what I innovated was, I was on Twitter. I was really early on Twitter in Ghana. And so I would tweet the song titles. No one was doing that at the time. I'm almost 100% sure I was the first person on Ghanaian radio who I would literally go on there and say, there's an app, it's called Twitter, download it, and you can follow the songs that I'm playing as I play them. Because I knew I had a short amount of time.
Yeah.
The marketing team didn't want me talking unless I was selling something. And so it's like that. And so, so instead of like, oh, I just finished playing this, like they might mention the last song they played, but not the song before that and the one before that. I was like, go onto that app called Twitter, follow me, my name is Kobby Graham, and I'm listing all of the songs that I'm playing.
Sure.
And so people go to Twitter for that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's dope. Yeah.
So in terms of going back to innovation.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. But so listening, I listen to a lot of like Selection. I listen to like the kinds of playlists that come up on Spotify, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
Yeah, and I use Shazam a lot.
Yeah, me too.
Even when I'm watching TV, like there are some TV shows that have great songs that you can work into a set. Grey's Anatomy. I've forgotten the name of the song. There's Narcos. They have a great theme song. I listen to TV adverts and I pick songs from there, etc. Shazam has really helped. So another thing that I enjoy listening to, and a space for listening to great music, is Oroko Radio. Oroko Radio is essentially an online community radio station. What they've done is they've created an online radio station, and because it's online, it's free. You see, it's free not just in terms of cost, but it's free in terms of content. So there's just a lot of freedom, and so you can go on there and type in any genre, and there'll be a list of shows that come up. And they give artists shows, not prominent artists, just like underground artists, alternative artists, DJs, etc., etc. So you're in Ghana and you want to know about Brazilian Baia Funk, you can tune in. You want hip hop, you can tune in. You want Afrobeats, you can tune in. You want Amapiano, you just go there. And
Wow. So just to stop you there, are they technology guys?
No, the music guys is so this is
So they've just because I'm thinking about it as a platform. That's a lot of like collating information.
So
right?
every year people can apply to do a show. So I have a show there myself.
Okay.
I do a show there called Low Life.
Okay.
Which is basically looking at the history of the alternative music scene. Because people are seeing all this alternative music and stuff, but people don't realize that there is work that has been put in.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to put that together. But I also like listening to other people's shows, you see. So like Radical has a show called Just Beats that I love listening to. Or Vibe Architecture by Edwin. Ria Boss has a show on there. So there are so many great shows on there that you're actually spoiled for choice. And when I'm driving, I actually stream because I get more music listening. So I stream through my phone and connect it to the car.
Yep.
When I'm at home, I use my internet connection and my laptop.
Sure.
And I get so much great music and conversation and everything.
It's like a radio station.
It's a radio station, but it's an online radio station. So they have the live stream.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
But then they also have individual shows that you can choose and listen to. Sometimes they put the shows on. In fact, they always put the shows on Mixcloud. They have a Mixcloud, and you can go there as well. Got it. But if you find the page for the specific DJ or host, you find their shows there as well.
Got it.
And I am in love with Oroko because it's what I needed when I first came, and it wasn't here. And I'm so proud of the existence of this station. Yeah. And the fact that they've come in and they've trained DJs, especially women DJs. And so now you're seeing there's actual club culture in Accra that is DJ led, and it's mostly women-led as well. Nice. And they've created safe spaces. It reminds me of like the house scene in early Chicago and Detroit, and how these were inclusive, safe spaces for everybody. Yeah. And that's what they're doing in Accra now. And I feel like a grandfather watching the kids. And I love it. I love it.
So what does Oroko mean?
Yeah, I'm not sure what Oroko means actually. I'm not sure what it means. Okay. But
it's rocking.
It's rocking. And I love Oroko Radio, and I just want everybody to listen to Oroko.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah. And again, show notes, folks, show notes.
And then watching.
Yes.
I think right now I am more of a watcher than I am anything else.
Okay.
Yeah. With the recent DJing, I guess I'm a listener more than anything else, but I watch a lot. Every evening, I definitely go onto YouTube and I pick things that I've lined up to watch. And it could be anything, some educational thing from
right.
TED animations or something to do with the Marvel universe, or something from the Big Think about masculinity in the world. Just it could be something like that. But I literally keep an app on my phone that tells me, the latest TV show that I'm watching is a new episode is out. So right now, I'm watching The Power on Amazon.
The Power?
The Power. It's so it's based on a book, and what happens is all of a sudden, young women across the world, they develop the ability to generate electricity, like an electric eel.
Okay.
And this causes a shift in power across the world. What are the implications of that?
I like that. Check that one out.
It's very, very, very interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm watching that.
Okay, that's Amazon?
Yeah, that's on Amazon. I am also started watching Citadel on Amazon. It's okay. If you like Jason Bourne, James Bond, those kinds of things, it's okay. I'm seeing where it goes, but it's not like my favorite. I am a geek. Have been. One of my earliest memories is sitting on my father's lap watching Star Trek.
Okay.
And so I loved Star Trek Strange New Worlds. I'm waiting for the new season of that.
Okay.
I loved Atlanta. I loved Bel Air. I loved Dear White People on Netflix.
Sure.
A range of things.
Yeah.
So A lot of cancelled shows, unfortunately, because that seems to be a trend at the moment. I am enjoying the new, the Jada Pinkett Smith executive produced.
Oh, the
things.
one about the
Yeah, so Nzinga. I thought that was really good as a kind of. I wish they'd had the kind of budget that the Woman King had. But they did the best that they could and told a story, and that was really good. I'm looking forward to the new Queen Cleopatra.
You know, I was reading something controversial about
Yes,
that.
I know.
Yeah. And the Egyptians
Yes.
that were...
I have a take on it.
Yes, let's hear it.
And I get it. If you're an Egyptian right now, I can understand why.
If you're a light-skinned Egyptian.
Yes, if you're a light-skinned Egyptian.
Yes.
And I can understand why you might take umbrage at the depiction of Cleopatra as being black, even though the actress that was chosen for the role, I would argue,
Looks like you.
yeah, like as
She looks like you.
Yeah, she's not black as in
Yeah.
like me.
Right.
So I'm just like, okay, fine. My personal take on it is, my grandmother once told me that her grandmother told her that the Ashanti are descended from people who fled the Islamization of the north of Africa.
Right.
I heard this in my childhood. And then I went to the School of Oriental and African Studies. And I remember picking up a book about the Ashanti by a European writer called Eva Meyerowitz. And she grounded that in some truth.
Right.
And talked about this link between the Ashanti and Upper Sudan and Lower Egypt.
Yep.
Not necessarily from that time. I've done a lot of reading over time about the pyramids having been started by the Nubian peoples. And so they had smaller pyramids and just had more pyramids.
Yep.
And there was clearly a relationship between the people of Egypt, cosmopolitan though they were, and the Nubian people, to the extent that you had pharaohs who were actually Nubian, because very briefly Nubia took over Egypt. So blackness has existed not just in Egypt but in North Africa for a very long time.
Sure.
Now we used to call them Berbers, but I think they're now called is it the Amazighi people? The Amazigh people, and these are people who, like Zinedine Zidane, formerly of
France.
France. He's Berber descended, and if you look at the history of the Berbers, if you look at the history of Christianity, you find a lot of the early thinking in the church was from Berbers. Origen, Arius, and Athanasius. These were all Berbers, and Berbers were known to be essentially Africans, as in Black Africans.
Right.
So my personal take is, I know that there was a time where Egypt didn't look the way that it does now.
Exactly.
And I'm not going to go as far as to say that they were all black, but there was an Islamization that happened, or if you want, an Arabization that happened.
Right.
And I know this because my people fled that. There was a point in time where I was dating, I started dating a northern Nigerian Muslim in secondary school in the UK. And I remember at the time my mum was just like, And I was like, why? Like, what's your problem? I don't know you to be prejudiced. And she said that it's actually really weird for an Ashanti to date a Muslim. And I'm like, why? And she says, traditionally speaking, as Ashanti, to become Muslim is like an insult to your ancestors who fled the Islamization, and some died in the journey across the Sahara. So
I never knew that.
But then at the same time, the Ashanti had relationships with
Traders,
Islam through trade and stuff like that. I hear that we used to hire Muslims to do accounting and stuff like that in the palace and stuff like that. So there's always been these really interesting relationships on the continent. But long story short, there was a time where Egypt didn't look the way that it does now. I'm not going to go as far as to say what it looks like, but if people are going to be really upset about the depiction of Cleopatra as a light-skinned African, I think there's some very interesting questions that maybe they need to ask themselves.
Oh, we know there are.
Yeah.
Yeah, we very much know. I had a guest that is Egyptian on the podcast, and so he does tours, like real historical tours. He is a researcher. Like so everything that you're saying, and there really is what we don't know about. There's this other Egypt that is a Black Egypt, and that the culture has always been to marginalize the Blackness of the country.
Yeah,
so,
and that's been there for a very, very long time. Yeah, that's been there for a very long time. And in history, you just see a lot of that. And so, yeah, but I will be watching Queen Cleopatra.
Okay.
Jada Pinkett will be receiving my Netflix subscription.
Okay.
And
All right, those are good watches. It's so interesting that you said you're not reading much, because I remember when we were filming that we were talking books, and you recommended She Would Be King. And I really enjoyed that book.
Yes.
Yeah. Speaking of Afrofuturism.
Yes. I was doing a lot more reading at that point in time. I must say, okay, so in fairness, I don't get the chance to read as much, but what I have been doing
you experience them in a different way.
I've been using Audible.
Yes. That is actually how I consume most of the books.
Okay, so in that sense, I do have things that I have been reading. I'm currently reading. My best friend basically says I don't get enough sleep and it's criminal, and so I'm reading The Sleep Revolution by Arianna Huffington.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm currently reading.
Okay, that's different.
But I think I'm reading a lot more factual stuff at the moment than fiction.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's very well rounded.
Thank you.
A lot of different experiences. This is wonderful. Kobby, this has been wonderful. It's been so nice catching up. You've been so generous with your time. I'm so appreciative. So before we sign off, do you have any last thoughts you'd like to share with our audience?
The thought that I have is to do with glocalization. There was a point in time where if you go online now and you look up my name and the BBC, there's an article that will come up where I was telling everybody that everybody needs to come back to Ghana now, like now is the time, and blah blah blah. And I remember having a conversation with Aisha from the shop Accra. And we talked about people who are abroad, who are doing great things for Africa from abroad. We talked about people who are here and have stayed, and who came and went. And so I think the phrase that I can't lay claim to it, Aisha said it. She said, the danger of the single returnee story.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I think that I've moved past the point where I feel everybody just needs to come back, not immediately.
Yeah.
I think that everybody should, at the very least, visit. But we should all represent Africa in our spaces. And not just represent, but try and give back as best as we can. We are a continent who we do not know how much we give back in remittances. The official figures. But based on the official figures alone, the official figures outstrip
the economy.
Not just the economy, but they outstrip aid.
Yes.
Like, it doesn't matter if you combine the UK, America, France, wherever, all the aid combined does not reach the official amount that is being given in remittances by ordinary rank and file Ghanaians who are working on the London Underground and sweeping the streets abroad. That speaks to, again, this collaborative spirit and communalism. And it speaks to, so that's like an economic outlook, but then a cultural outlook, because if we talk about Afrobeats, for example, in the world right now, some of that would not be happening without young Africans who are abroad, who haven't even come home yet. You see, and so to me, I'm very interested in people being African in their spaces everywhere in the world to the benefit of Africa and Africans.
Yeah, and that's what we're here for.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, Glocal citizens, this has been another episode of the podcast. You can catch us Tuesdays with new episodes at glocalcitizenspod.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Google, Apple,
Spotify,
Amazon, yes, and Spotify. You get the drift. Like, share, subscribe, tell a friend. Sharing is caring. That's collaboration, folks. So until next time, bye for now.